Okay, welcome back. We're still on page 51 talking about the 10 characteristics of an organization. And so reward criteria is the last one we talked about. And you can kind of imagine that if you're an up-and-coming type of person, you'd want to have rewards that are applicable to you rather than just like seniority. Conflict tolerance. Are you encouraged to speak freely? Is it okay for you to say, I don't think it's a dumb idea? That's a kind of an interesting way of thinking about an organization. But yeah, it's one of those things where, yes, is it okay for me to speak out? Am I going to get punished? You can imagine how you could get graded. Means justifies the ends orientation. Are you one of those companies that run so fast that it's okay to kind of look the other way and maybe you're not exactly doing things exactly right, but as long as if it comes out okay, can you just play loose with the rules and everything comes out okay at the end, you won't get in trouble? Is that the kind of organization that you're in? And then open system. And we're not talking about open software. We're talking about how open you are to having other things come in, outside issues. You have an entire environment inside the organization, and you have this huge environment on the outside of the organization. And are you looking at it from their perspective as well, not just the ones inside the company? Okay, so several of these characteristics, depending on how you're scored, is going to make a significant change. It's going to make it a heck of a lot more pleasant to do a project in that kind of an organization. By the way, I mentioned to you before, you're rarely going to be in a position to alter these things, right? I mean, you might have a little bit of an effect, but you're not going to be changing, for example, the reward criteria, right? So you're just going to have to be aware of it and kind of plug into these characteristics of your organization. Okay, on page 52, they talk about stakeholders one more time. So recall that there's basically two different types of stakeholders. The internal ones, the sponsor, your team, the support for your team, and any internal customers that you might have. There's also external ones, your customers, your competitors, right? Your competitors are a stakeholder. They don't show up for meetings, but they definitely have a way of influencing things. Your suppliers, again, you're probably not going to invite your suppliers in. Maybe you would. And then concerned citizens. You could have people who are against the project. You could have some cranky old lady who used to have a lot of power be opposed to the project. Or if it's some sort of a construction project, you're going to have people saying, not in my backyard. You can't build that processing plant here. So all those guys are stakeholders. Okay. So basically what this whole section is about is we need to identify, understand, and manage these relationships. We need to cultivate relationships in all these areas. That's what it's all about. So in the case study, the guy who put this thing together was surprised to find that there were other stakeholders. He basically showed up at a meeting and said, hey, so here's the project. And other people raised their hand and said, well, wait a minute, you didn't ask me, and I'm in charge of this and this and this, and you didn't ask me, and I have to do this, this, and this. It's all about there's a term for it, an unfunded mandate. In a meeting, you can probably imagine if somebody says, well, from now on, we're going to do this, this, and this. I go, wait a minute. That's going to cost 10% of my budget. No one talked to me about this. What's going on? So, yeah, if you get surprised in a meeting by not knowing who the stakeholders are, your project is doomed, okay? So yeah, you've got to do your homework. You've got to follow the whole project management system so you won't get surprised in a meeting when somebody raises their hand and say, well, I have a vested interest in this project and you never came talk to me at all. Okay. So continuing on page 54, the top management commitment. This is probably the number one issue in the success or failure of a project. Is somebody in top management really, really wanting this? If they champion this thing and say, by God, we're going to go to this new payroll system. We're going to go to this new payroll system and it's going to make things so much better. Or actually, let me back up. It doesn't matter. If the guy says, look, we're going to go to this new payroll system. It's probably not as good as the one we're using now, but it's okay. We're going to do it anyway. If he's in charge and he says, by God, I want to do this, the rest of the system will the rest of the people will kind of fall into place. So every project needs basically a sponsor. A sponsor is some high roller somewhere. For example, let's go back to the scenario in the case today. You're some IT puke buried deep in the organization. So you want to send out a meeting request. And you're sending it out to division chiefs, right? They're going to look at that and go, yeah, right. And they're not going to show up for your meeting. But if the vice president of the organization said, say, I want you guys to come to this meeting and talk about this project, they'd probably show up, right? Okay, so you need a sponsor. Okay, cool. So the sponsors basically provide you 4 things. It provides you resources because you're probably going to have to go somewhere to get your project started. You're going to need people, money. You're also going to need some visibility. You can't do this thing in hiding in the shadows. You're going to need some sort of approval process. You're probably going to need to be delegated some authority from someone who has the authority to hire people is going to have to delegate that to you. And, some sort of flexibility for unique scenarios. If we're talking about approval processes, if you're working on a project that, you don't know what it is you need yet, and so you're about a third of the way through the project and you go, oh man, our existing database server is not going to cut it at all. We're going to need to buy another one now, quick, hurry. Then you need somebody with the approval authority that says, yeah, okay. This is an important project. The company president said we're going to do this by June. So, by God, we're going to order a new database server. Cool. Cooperation. You need somebody who can deal with the politics for you or help you deal with the politics. Someone big in the organization that says, I understand that we're talking about taking, 12% of your people for a period of 2 weeks, but too bad. We're going to do it anyway, right? Okay, cool. And then you need somebody who's a mentor and a coach for any type of leadership issues. And that's a good thing because you're supposed to be growing your own project managers as you do that. So it's one of the goals, believe it or not, of doing project management is to grow your own project leaders so they can do this better the next time. Okay, so continuing to talk about organizational commitment to IT on page 55. I was in an organization where I was in charge of a very small IT section. We only had 5 or 6 people. And management decided that, we just don't need the IT folks anymore. We're just going to rely on the corporate IT at the top. We don't need our own little IT cell deep inside our organization. We're just going to do away with it all and have those guys at the top do it all for us. It was a total disaster, but that's not really the point of the story. The point of the story is they did not view IT as being of any value. They didn't actually see how we were saving them millions of dollars worth of productivity and all the rest of it. They didn't actually see it. They didn't have the right kind of visibility, and they just didn't think that IT was all that valuable. To them, it was all about, we need to do this and whatever our core competencies is. Like, okay, great. So they did not value IT. So one of the problems is the traditional way of thinking about IT kinds of commitments is different. If you're in one of those command and control kind of organizations, that's probably not going to work well when you're working on an IT project. You need to switch from command and control to, vision and inspiration. So command and control, vision and inspiration. You need to switch your thinking processes because you can't have command and control during an IT project. That's a disaster. So one of the things that kind of comes up is how visible is the IT folks? Are the IT folks, buried deep in the organization? No one ever sees them. There's a thing called a visibility paradox, and it goes like this. If the only time you see the IT people is when something goes wrong, okay, that's the only time you hear about them. They don't have any visibility whatsoever until something crashes. If that's the view you have, then no one's going to give them money. No one's going to provide them resources to do stuff because all they see is, we have to have some people that crash. Now, the problem is, let's say you have 2 organizations. This organization over here has 5 people, and this organization has 5 people, and they both basically do the same IT job. Over here, these guys are pretty sharp, and they make sure that problems get solved before they come up. For example, they don't shut the system down in the middle of a work day to install a patch. They come out on the weekend to do it. So they do it so that it's not interfering with the organization. Over here, the same 5 people, they're running around crazy, and they shut systems down in the middle of the day to do patches and stuff. And so they have higher visibility than these guys. These guys made sure that they did not interfere, so they have less visibility. So when it comes time to, giving an award or giving budget or people, the people who do poorly are typically going to get more reward than the people who work behind the shadows and do an excellent job. Crazy, huh? Okay, let's continue. So there's a best practices on page 55. There's a shaded area on page 55 that talk about this stuff. And one of the things they talk about is IT governance, which is what we just talked about, is really, really required. You have to have some way of, do you have a CIO? Do you have some sort of a structure? Are they just buried deep in the organization? Or is this an important thing? Do the IT people come brief the company president or the CEO about issues on a routine basis, rather than waiting for things to crash or waiting for me to, come up and say, please, I need more resources? If that's the only time you see the IT folk, when they come beg for money or when things go wrong, you're not doing it right. You need to be talking about all the wonderful things that you're doing at the same time. IT governance now is pretty much well mandated because of security. So if you're in an organization that has, customer data, probably there is somebody already at the top of the pyramid who has that responsibility of security. You need to kind of tap into it. So the next thing to talk about is, poor IT governance is largely blamed for some major project failures. And that shaded area talks about some of the examples. And there are some good ones out there, some good examples out there of how, just didn't get the right visibility and these things just failed miserable. Okay, continuing on, they talk about organizational standards. So on page 56, they talk about, we're talking about mundane things. Like, is there a standard procedure for how to acquire a computer? Is there a form you fill out to get supplies? I need pencils and papers and erasers, those kinds of things. You need to be tapped into that. You don't want to be, okay, we're going to stand up this new project and, wait a minute, how do I go about in getting a computer? If you don't know the procedures, and okay. So some of the procedures in an IT-related organization, for example, are using some sort of source code version control system, as an example. Software choices. So does the organization already have, are you a Microsoft shop? Or do you, for example, prefer Microsoft SQL Server or Oracle? Do you have any Linux boxes? Is it all Microsoft? Those are kind of the organizational standards. Somebody came up with a standard, and whether or not it's written down or not, you don't want to, for example, let's say it's a complete Microsoft shop, and you said, it'd be easier for us to install this on a Linux server. It'll be a little cheaper, and it'll be easier. But no one else in the organization's ever heard of it. No one's been trained on it. And they're going to look at it and go, oh, man, why didn't you just do a Microsoft server? Because everyone knows how to run that. Okay, cool. Perhaps there's a project office. Remember we talked about in Chapter 1, they talked about some organizations actually have a chief projects officer, someone who's responsible for kind of managing all these projects that are happening. And that would be kind of cool. And then, of course, it almost sounds like advertisements for the project management folks, but there is a statement in here that says one of the standards you could have is every single project manager should be a certified, a PIMP, a PMP. Okay, we're coming up on the 15-minute mark one more time.